It's December now, nearly Christmas, and I'm doing my last review of the year of the books that I've read over the last month. So, last month, which was November, I said that I was reading this book, Music at Midnight, The Life and Poetry of George Herbert by John Drury. Okay, so I was reading this book. I have totally given up on this book because I was very bored. So it's very unusual of me to actually give up on a book. I'm usually quite determined, even if I'm not particularly enjoying it. But I think the problem was the book that I read before was The Seven Pillars of Wisdom by T.E. Lawrence, which although it was very interesting and I did enjoy it, it was very long and slightly tiring. And I just couldn't be bothered to read more stuff that wasn't really gripping me and exciting me. And this was definitely not gripping me and exciting me. So I wanted to read about this George Herbert because I heard him recommended as a really, really good English poet. And he lived a long time ago. Can't remember when. I think it was the 1500s I think it was the 1600s actually. So I thought it'd be like, and I'm interested in that time and everything, but I just found it quite boring. So I stopped reading it. I just really wanted a taste of his poetry to read a few of his poems, whereas this was it was a biography. It included a lot of his poems, and it also had poetical analysis of the poems, which is probably really interesting if you're a big fan of his. But I didn't love his poetry, the bits that I read, and I was quite bored by his life, and I found the literary explanations, like, when you're reading people critique something that they're obviously an expert in and they love and all that, but it's like everything in it proves their point, and everything in it is the best example of it, and you're just reading thinking, it's not really though, is it? It's not really that good. So that's my opinion. Things I did like about it, I like the maps. I love looking at old maps. Right, anyway, I've got one poem to read out from that. I proper gave up by about I think I got to about page 60 or 70, and I just thought, I'm still not enjoying this. And I've got some other books that I really want to read, which I will get on to. So, actually, I'll just tell you quickly what they are. We've got None Dare Call It Conspiracy and The Withway. Both much more exciting. So we're going to get on to them really soon. Anyway, I thought I'd read out one of the poems. Some of the poems were quite pretty. The other thing was, I was not really getting into it, and then I read in it that he'd made a decision early on to dedicate all his poetry to being about God and Jesus. And it's like, fine, but I think if you're going to limit yourself like that, you're going to limit yourself, aren't you? And I got a bit bored of reading about God and Jesus. Anyway, here we are, page 13, Discipline. Right, throw away thy rod, throw away thy wrath, O my God. Take the gentle path. Wrath? For my heart's desire unto thee is bent, I aspire to a full consent. Not a word or look I affect to own, but by book, and thy book alone. Though I fall, I weep, though I halt in pace, yet I creep to the throne of grace. Then thy wrath remove, love will do the deed, for with love stony hearts will bleed. Love is swift of foot, love's a man of war, and can shoot and hit from far. Who can scape his bow? That which wrought on thee, brought thee low, needs must work on me. Throw away thy rod, though man frailties hath. Thou art God, throw away thy wrath. So I thought that was like the favourite poem that I read while I was reading this. I like that one the best, and it's got nice rhyming bits and things generally. Nice rhyming bits. It was just a bit too pious for me. Anyway, let's go on to the exciting books. So, None Dare Call It Conspiracy by Gary Allen. So, I mean, like, conspiracy is a bit of a dirty word nowadays, isn't it? I think it's always been a dirty word. It's a slur, really, isn't it? Um, so, but we do seem to be, it feels like we're sort of living in an age of conspiracies, or crumbling of them, or exposing of them. So this is a really great book to read to get you worked up and angry at the system. And if you need justification to want to tear down the controlling structures, here it is. Okay, he's very passionate about what he's writing. And he's really, throwing all these, look, and they've done this, and they've done this, and getting you all worked up and, oh, God, yes, look what they've done. However, I think this book would definitely be a bit too much for a lot of the normies to start off with. So you probably want to have a bit of an interest in this area already, unless you think you're very open-minded, ready to break out of the box. It was first published in 1972, so obviously it is not covering the things that have happened since then. For me, there was a bit too much of a focus on communism. Now, I understand why that was a focus, particularly then. I think, especially nowadays, we're kind of past those labels. And even he himself, points out again and again how the idea of communism that is sold to the people is different from the idea of communism that is being actually operated and rolled out. But I just don't want to keep saying words like, oh, it's communism is the problem, because you get into all the intricacies of, well, what is communism and what does it mean and is it being done right and all that. We know what the problem is. It's tyrannical people in charge. And he definitely points that out really well. I disagree about some of his ideas about government and anarchy, such as he talks about, you need some kind of government, otherwise things will descend into anarchy and chaos, which I don't agree with. But however, I did think it was good. It gives you a lot of sort of history as well, but history about sort of how power works and rulership and how money is used to control people, controlling governments, controlling people who live in a country. These are things which I think are really interesting, and sometimes that can kind of become the conspiracy or the taboo that you're not supposed to talk about, even though it's so there clearly. And he talks about the use of debt and war to control and drive policy, which is really interesting and really relevant. So it's all really good. Basically, it's about deceit, isn't it? It's about getting power over people through deception, through claiming that you're going to represent them and be look after people, protect them, all these things. But generally what the people are being told is lies to keep them manipulated and controlled. And especially about how money is used. And money is such an interesting area, and how it is used by people to control, lives. And I mean, you look at our lives nowadays, lots of people are in debt. Even before they start working, they might be in debt from university fees and things like that. You've got mortgages, which are massive debts that people take on. The amount of work that people, money that people are earning, and how disproportionate that is to levels of incomes of other levels of society, and how they also often escape taxes and accountability and things like that. It's an incredibly skewed and unfair system. And he also talks about how sort of tax is theft, and I think that's a really interesting idea to explore further, because we're sort of taught so much about how tax is a good thing because it's going to help people, and how we should be happy to pay tax and do our bit. But how does that really work in reality? And the amount of money that goes to the government in tax is just absolutely immense. And then when you look at the kinds of things that they are spending it on, I think we can agree that it is not what most people actually prioritise and actually want. and if people had more input in how that specific money is spent, I think there would be a lot more focus on improving people's lives day to day, rather than, you know, overseas wars and big global sort of actions and things like that, because I don't think that's really what most people want. Anyway, and he talks about other things sort of in the whole conspiracy world of Chatham House, Council on Foreign Relations, Royal Institute of International Affairs, UN, and the big banking groups, which, you know, I'll leave people to sort of find out about on their own. They're very interesting rabbit holes to go down and find out about. There were some things I didn't like. I didn't particularly like his writing style. Found it a bit arrogant. But, you know, I can look past that. He also talks about the involvement of some of these groups, like the ones I just mentioned, Chatham House, Council on Foreign Relations, UN, and how they are behind all political colours. So, you know, we might think we have democracy because we're voting for a certain party, but there are the sort of the same groups operating behind all of them, and often funding both sides of them and working towards the same goals. So whether you think, you know, you're voting for a sort of capitalist government or a communist government, you can often end up with, if you go far enough back, there's the same kind of ideals that they're all sort of roughly heading towards. And also about the fudging of the official narrative to get the outcomes that they want. I mean, you know, you just see that every day in politics. I'm kind of quite uninterested in politics nowadays. I used to be very, very interested in it. But I think, you know, many of us have moved past the left and right, if you're in England, like Labour, Conservative divides, and we can just see how these things are so meaningless, and the real sort of things that are being pushed come in whatever party there is, and they're not the things that we vote for. Okay, so that was that book. Got one quote to read out from it. Oh yeah, so there was as well, the book was very well laid out in explaining his arguments, and then he's also got at the end which what he calls the 14 signposts to slavery. I mean, he's a bit dramatic in his language, but they were really interesting, and they're things that you've seen being sort of imposed at certain times, or ideas that are trying to be pushed. But I just like this quote in this section where he's talking about it, saying the insiders, the people who are pushing these things, are counting on your being too preoccupied with your own problems or too lazy to fight back while the chains of slavery are being fastened on you. They are counting on their mass media to con you, frighten you, or ridicule you out of saving your freedom. And most of all, they are counting on your thinking you can escape by not taking part in opposing their takeover. So I thought that was really a really good quote. I think that really is a message that people need to hear. You know, it's time for people to stand up and take their own freedom if they want it, instead of giving it away and allowing it to be taken. There's also a section on what you can do personally to help in these matters, which I always think is good when people can give, you know, some solutions rather than just laying out the problem. Okay, so that was that book. I would really recommend that book. It was a really good read. Obviously it's of another time, but a lot of the players are the same players, and the new players are playing the same game, so it's really relevant, really good. Okay, so after I read that book, after having these problems so brutally laid out in None Dare Call It Conspiracy, I read The Withway by Paul Cudenec, and it was wonderful to be soothed by these inspiring solutions that are offered in this book. So I previously read The Anarchist Revelation by Paul Cudenec, which I really enjoyed. I think I enjoyed this book more. It's a newer book. It's sort of so the Anarchist Revelation book was sort of written, I think it was actually written pre-2016, but it was definitely pre-2020. Whereas this book was only published, I think it was published this year actually. And it just really feels 2022, and it just really feels, you know, of this time, and looking forward from where we've been and trying to create the world that we want. So it was published last year and it felt fresh and appropriate for where humanity is. It's managed to convey the optimism, love and practicality that underlies the ideals of living anarchistically. So I really, really liked it. It was really sort of, yeah, good. So he talks about, in the preface, he talks about the loss of those left-right labels that I was talking about before and moving on from politics. And I really feel that, and I think a lot of people really feel that. And I hear people talk about things in that kind of Tory Labour way. And it just seems so hollow and just so clearly, you know, a veneer. Right. So in the book, he relies heavily on quotes from a wide-ranging field to support his ideas. So he's got lots of sort of different people, sort of philosophers, religious and spiritual leaders, or you know, mystics and things like that. He also talks about myths and legends and other sort of traditional ways of life, to sort of show these ideas, you know, like reflected in so many different ways around the world and through different times. Because I think that's what a lot of us are learning as well, is that whatever way we're coming to this from, excuse me, whatever way we're coming to it, it's the same thing. And you see that at the bottom of different religions and different legends and ideas, that really it's the same thing, and that's really exciting as well, because it just adds to the truth of what it is that you are envisioning and wanting for the future. So it's really good. Okay, right, let's read a quote. Right, okay, so it's talking about like what the Withway is. So when we picture birds in a wood, bees in a bank of flowers, or fish in a stream, do we feel the need to draw a hard line between birds and forest, bees and flowers, or fish and water? Or can we conceive of them as belonging to one and the same phenomenon, as simultaneously birds with trees and trees with birds, as bees with flowers and flowers with bees, as fish with water and water with fish? And ourselves, can we still remember ourselves as people with the land, as the land with people? Can we rediscover our identity in that living, organic entity? Okay, so this is this thing about how we should be living much closer to our land where we are, and have, you know, that deeper understanding and relationship with it. And I think that's something that a lot of us are feeling, and that a lot of us desire and want to incorporate into our future. So that's what this book is about, and supporting and and giving us ways of actually doing that as well. So as I said, he references lots of different philosophies and backgrounds that are sort of all coming to the same conclusion. So he's talking about this mesh of life, of humans, land, animals, weather. You know, we're all part of Earth. Okay, we're of Earth, and the seasons and things like that, and how we have this close relationship. Okay, our natural withness means that we have evolved not in competition with nature, nor alongside nature, but with and within nature. Okay, and also science backs all this stuff up as well. You know, it's all, like I say, it's all the same thing, telling us the same thing, just in different ways. Okay, and then he talks about sort of discussing the immediate threat, because it has kind of taken this real feeling of a threat on the world. You know, it feels like it's got to a breaking point for a lot of us to decide that we are really going to do something about this and not allow this to continue any longer. So he talks about transhumanism, once seen as a peripheral cult of semi-crazed, life-hating fantasists, has now revealed itself to be the official religion of the worldwide global establishment, a dominant death cult possessed of enormous financial wealth and thus power. We are faced with the possibility of a nightmare future in which the very essence of humanity has been destroyed, in which every last one of us has been removed from our natural belonging to each other and to nature, and reduced to the status of units of human capital in a digital economy, our life energy harvested for the profit and pleasure of a clique of venal and sociopathic parasites. Okay, now, you know, whether you like it or not, or whether you think that it's overdramatic, that is where we are. The general name, so how did we get to this point? The general name we could give to everything that assaults, undermines, pollutes and destroys our natural witness is power. Power is a form of separation. A human being who seeks power over another has ceased to regard that person as a fellow subject and treats them instead as an object. The denial of witness, of mutual sympathy with fellow human beings, breaks the natural bond which creates natural order. Yes. Okay. And he then goes on to talk about these ideas of sort of technic and technophilia, which is this obsession with technology and always using technology as a solution to every problem, as well as the cult of progress. And you definitely see that, and you see a lot of people just really accept that this is the direction it's going, so just go with it. But there are also a lot of people who are like, no, this is crap. You know, this is it's crap. I don't want this. This is rubbish. It's not improving my life, actually. So I don't want it. And also, it is that removal from nature. And actually, we are so removed from nature in so many ways. But when we can find a link back to it, you know, we know that how important that is, and how happy that can make us, and how much it fulfills us. Right, a couple more quotes on this subject. So, there is a downward spiral involved here. The more we are physically separated from nature, the less we care about it, and the easier it becomes for the criminal profiteers to plunder and destroy the organism to which we unknowingly belong. I think that's really true. I think that's really where we are. And there's so many things that we know aren't being done right, whether it's mining of materials, energy, not necessarily energy, like energy usage, things like that, the production of food, the production of goods. We know how wrong these things are, and we know it's not how we should be living. But because we're so detached from nature, we allow it to continue. Like, I mean, I've said for years that to solve everything within the food industry and the way that food is produced and animals are treated and things like that, if you had everybody did, like on some kind of rolling basis, worked a month in a food industry, any food industry, these problems would be solved. Because if people knew what was going on, if they were involved with it, they would want to think of ideas to make things be done better. And it's that connection with our food, with where we come from, with the materials that we use. Okay. Okay. Right. Okay, so if money is merely a means, so he's talking about how money isn't of any real value. You know, money is just what you use as a trading tool. If money is merely a means, then work, as we know it today, is a means to a means. We have to labour to earn a wage, because without money we cannot exist in the society built by the money power. Work, in an old-fashioned sense, always has to be done. Food has to be gathered, grown, prepared, water has to be fetched, homes have to be built, cleaned, maintained, clothes and shoes and tables and knives and dishes have to be fashioned. The sick and the young and the old have to be cared for. But this is work we do for ourselves, because it has to be done or we want to do it. It is as much a part of human existence as breathing and walking, and does not keep us chained up for hour upon endless hour, for week after week, year after year, decade after decade. Working with a knife at our throats because a criminal mafia insists we pay for the pleasure of living in the world that they have stolen from us does not make us free. It makes us slaves. Okay, so these are a lot of the ideas that were in the None Dare Call It Conspiracy book. You know, he's really presenting them in a really like elegant way. Okay, so we have to know ourselves to know the universe. Okay, our belonging here depends on our belonging within, in and out. Okay, so it's this thing about we need to get not just more in touch with nature outside of us, but our own nature inside. And the more we can get in touch with ourselves inside, the more we can rekindle that relationship with our earth. I think so many of us feel this now. So I just, from so many different angles, hearing it. Okay. When we are young, we imagine that a question as important as how we should best live must have already been resolved by the great minds of previous generations, and that it is simply a question of finding one's way to the right philosophy, religion, or ideology. But as we get older, we realise that things aren't so simple, and that in taking the beaten track of other people's thinking, we usually find ourselves being led astray. It is much better to stay awake and alert, to notice the hints and signs left by others, but ultimately to rely on our own inner moral compass to guide us, our own sense of right and wrong, and our own instinctive reactions to the ever-changing conditions of the society in which we are living. Hey, I couldn't agree more. And right from the original, you know, you think this must have been answered by now, and to realising that you need to look to yourself. Okay. Okay. Right. An epidemic of fear and despair has been sweeping the world since 2020, with liberties abolished, livelihoods lost, childhoods ruined, families divided, communities splintered, hearts broken, dreams shattered, and lives left in ruins. And yet the seed of renewal can be found inside the darkest decay. The horrific sequence of events has also brought with it, despite itself, a glimmer of hope that it represents the beginning of the end of this malevolent historical era. It's all good. Okay. So, millions are today awakening, not just to the reality of the system, but to their own historical witness, the need to become an authentic individual by going beyond individualism, the need to find freedom by embracing responsibility. I think that's the thing. I think people are less inclined to just want to let other people make all the decisions for them. Let those experts decide the best way to do things. I think there is more of a feeling of, I want to live the way I feel is right. And I might change my mind about that. And I might go and do something differently. And those people over there can do something differently. And that's fine. Okay, so overall, I found this book very inspiring. You know, and I was really left feeling that we will change this world. The old game is over, and I think just so many people feel this. It's you know, it's wonderful. Okay, so on to the next books that I was reading. So the next book I was going to read was this, Ask and It Is Given by Esther and Jerry Hicks. I've actually finished that. I finished it a few days ago. So, but I haven't done a review for it yet. So that will have to be next month now. And then the book that I've just started reading is The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins. So I will have reviews for both of them in the new year. Okay, so that's the end of that. Have a lovely Christmas. Thank you.